Good morning, Southfield. Welcome to another Sunday morning edition of Adult Bible Class. I'm John McMath. We've been working our way through the books of Joshua and Judges. And I've got a little bit of a bounce there, Tim, if we could knock it down just a tad. Yeah, okay, a little further. Okay, today we're going to get into Gideon and maybe a little bit into his son. I don't know how much I want to spend time on Abimelech, but Gideon is a fascinating character. And he fits at about the halfway point through this Judges period. And we're going to see how Gideon, compared with perhaps Ehud and Deborah, is a step down. He's not an evil character, but his character is not nearly as high as either Ehud or Deborah. When we're done with Gideon, we're going to move on to the usurper Abimelech, and then look at Samson, and finally Jephthah. And as we get toward the end of the sequence, you're going to see how the character traits of the judges become less and less admirable. There's a definite downward trend, so that we see this picture being painted by the author, I really think is Samuel, that human leadership is not the ultimate answer to the sin problem in the world. Human leaders are essential, but ultimately, any nation's spiritual health and prosperity is going to depend on a relationship to God. Human leaders are a necessary part of that, but they can't force the issue. Godliness is at the core. And I think that's a big deal. It's traditional to believe that the book of Judges speaks of a time when there was no king, and that was a bad thing, and everybody wanted a king, and that would be a good thing, and Samuel was out of step with that. But that's not true. The ideal is for minimum human leadership and maximum individual liberty under God. And that's a biblical pattern that is primarily celebrated in the failure. So Judges is an interesting story, and it's kind of sad. We'll get toward the end of Judges, and we're going to go through some sections that are really, really disturbing as we see what really happens when people reject the king and choose to do what seems right in spite of the fact that God has commanded otherwise. Because that's really what's going on. Let's pray and we'll walk in this. Father, thank you for this day that you've given us to serve you and to walk with you. Teach us, Father, to understand your will, understand your principles, and put those to work in our lives as individuals and as families, in this way to transform our society. Help us, Father, to be obedient first to you. We pray in Christ's name, amen. Okay, so Gideon's story starts right off with Gideon in the Jezreel Valley. His hometown is a place called Ophrah, which is essentially no place in particular. It's a farming village at a crossroads in the middle of the Jezreel Valley, just to the north of a place that we call the Spring of Herod. And this photograph is taken at the water park campground thing that the Israelis have built around the Spring of Herod. And so Gideon's story takes place here in this Jezreel Valley at the foot of Megiddo and overlooking Mount Tabor. In other words, this is the second major story in Judges where the action takes place in the flat plain at the base of Mount Carmel, this Jezreel Valley. You have to wonder why it's so often that this valley of Megiddo turns out to be the place for a big battle. There are at least 28 large world-changing battles that took place here in this valley. A lot of scholars believe that the Megiddo plain will be the location of at least part of the battle sequence that we call Armageddon. I won't go through all the linguistics for that, but it's hard to picture a better place for a climactic battle for the control of Jerusalem than the plains at the base of Megiddo. It's a good place to have a battle if you're going to have one. And as Trump would say, it's better not to. I think he'll be overruled, and there will be these final battles. Okay, the oppressor this time is going to be the Midianites. Midianites are a nomadic people group. They're all over various parts of what we call the Levant. Moses interacted with Midianites. Joshua interacted with Midianites. They're around, and they come in and out. The Midianites in this case were a coalition of different tribes. They came together for raiding and plunder. The typical Middle Eastern nomadic tradition is a kind of raid and plunder society. You storm in out of the desert, steal what you want, and ride off into the distance. And typically with a bit of chivalry. Normally women and children were safe, and the men were safe if they didn't resist. But the men who resisted in any village would be killed, and the raiders would take what they wanted and off they'd go. Definitely not harmless, definitely not nice, but it's not total war. It's a raid and pillage, kind of an economy, and a bad thing. So the Midianites were doing this, and they were becoming larger and larger numbers, and they would swoop in fairly large numbers into the Jezreel Valley, apparently, and steal the fruits of agriculture, wheat and barley, and other things that grew there. And as we know today, everything grows in the Jezreel Valley. You've got like a 360-day-a-year growing season. You can just keep planting. It doesn't matter much when you plant. All right. Okay, so the sons of Israel did the evil thing in the sight of the Lord. Okay, traditional beginning to a judge account. What did they do that was so evil? Well, they went off and followed the Baals and did all of the evil stuff that's associated with that. They allowed the world to stomp them into its mold. See Romans 12:2. And as a result of that, the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian for 7 years. Okay, now Midian was not, don't think of the Midianites as a nation state. They're related but officially isolated tribal groups of Bedouin raiders. That's all they are. They'd come in out of the desert on camels. Come in fast, do their work, get out fast. Not nice. The power of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves the dens which were in the mountains, and the caves, and the strongholds. Okay, so they built places to hide, which is what you do. The piracy essentially destroyed the economy of the Israelites in the Jezreel Valley. A parallel here is during the Middle Ages. We know that from about 700 AD on literally until Thomas Jefferson put an end to it at the beginning of the American experiment, Muslim piracy in the Mediterranean pretty much shut down trade in the area. I've spent a good deal of time along the Mediterranean coast of Europe. And one of the things that you will notice if you explore around the southern coasts of Europe is that there aren't a lot of big cities. The big cities that are along the coast of Europe are modern. They're not old. The ancient places pretty much were abandoned in the 8th and 9th centuries. They moved inland. One of the centers of the church, of the Filipino church in the south of Italy, is a place called Cosenza, which in about the 8th century was moved from, it was a conglomeration of several groups of seaside villages, fishing villages and whatnot, who had to pick up and move. And they did it slowly over a period of about 100 years and moved into the mountains. And on the hill overlooking Cosenza is a great big castle for protection against the pirates. Because the pirates would come inland, they'd steal everything, they'd take slaves, and then they'd run back to their ships and get away. And to this day, the southern coast of Europe has a barren look to it. There's even a geological effect to that, what we call the younger fill, waterways and sediments, and that because of neglect along the coastline, the sediment has been allowed to fill into the river valleys in the lower coastal areas all along the southern coast of Europe, northern coast of Africa. It's all about piracy. So yes, the climate can be changed by man-made actions. And that's what piracy did. The Midianites had that kind of effect on a smaller scale. They just broke up the economy. They just ruined it. It's what happens anytime that the looters and pillagers get the upper hand on the productive part of society. This is why San Francisco has stopped being a fun place to go. I don't like going to San Francisco anymore. If shoplifting is okay up through whatever it is, $991, whatever, then you can't go anywhere. You have to stay away because the bad guys own the place. And this is the problem in Israel. The bad guys owned the place. And of course, there was no king in Israel. And the people of Israel had turned away from God, and they had no real commonality to stand up against these bad guys, the Midianites. And so off they were, and for it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites would come up with the Amalekites and the sons of the east and go against them. So they would camp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, as well as no sheep, ox, or donkey. Okay, so this is a widespread thing. The problem is not merely in the Jezreel Valley, but also down the coast. As far as Gaza, which is actually quite a ways. And they would come up like locusts, verse 5, for their number. They and their camels were innumerable, and they came into the land and devastated. So Israel was brought very low because of Midian. The sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. So there we have it. The people of Israel sinned. So God sent an oppressor. And finally, at long last, after years, the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. So the Lord sent a prophet. Oh no, that's interesting. In the previous judgeships, the Lord sent a judge. So here comes Deborah, or here comes Ehud, or here comes the judge. But this time the judge didn't come. Instead, God sent a prophet. This is suspicious. I'm beginning to wonder now, why did God do that? And the prophet came in, and we're not told who this is, and he didn't write anything, so we have very little record. But a prophet was sent to speak for God. And this was apparently something rather unusual, because we have the record here. God sent a prophet, and he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel." Okay, here is the message from God. And it's been a long time since there's been a message from God that anybody listened to. So here it comes. "It was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out from the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hands of the Egyptians and the hands of all your oppressors, and dispossessed them before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But you have not obeyed me." There's the story. The message from the prophet is not... You look at this. Paul likes to end his rather sometimes harsh statements with, "Therefore encourage one another with these words." But there's not much encouragement here. "I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. I brought you out in order that I might bring you into this good place, that you might enjoy the blessings of a land flowing with milk and honey. And you've blown it. You've served the other gods. You've chosen to serve other things that are not God. And now you're reaping the whirlwind. This is what you can expect when you do that." It's a very simple message. I suspect that preachers have been preaching that one for nigh on to 3,500 years now. But it's a necessary message for any nation. And so God's message is very simple. You're suffering because you've turned away from me. And God doesn't mean by this that everybody in the society had turned against God. All it takes is a sufficient quorum, if you will. You get a sufficient number of people within any society who have walked away from God, and it affects the whole society. And if the good people continue to do nothing about it, the situation simply gets worse. And electing a judge or a king or a president or whatever doesn't fix that. Your relationship to God is primary. So, now we introduce Gideon. In the other stories, we didn't get the long pre-story. Here we get this extended wake-up call. Then the angel of the Lord, again, this very, very important character who speaks with the full authority of God, able to do miracles. Very important character. As I've said before, I don't like to call this the pre-incarnate Christ. I think that takes away from the incarnation. But this is a very, very important character and a very powerful character. So the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. Let me show you the general area that I'm going to show you a wine press if I can manage it. Okay, that's Mount Tabor as viewed from approximately Gideon's spot. You see what I mean by the 38 Chevy hubcap? It's kind of a shield volcano. And the bump at the top is the conveniently placed monastery, so that pilgrims will have a place to go to celebrate the Transfiguration, which actually happened 70 miles north. That's, If you've walked all the way from Europe to come and worship on top of Mount Tabor, it doesn't matter. Really, if you're into that, that's the way it goes. So the angel of the Lord appeared to him while he was running away from the Midianites. These are Midianite camels being led by a Midianite at the front. He was carrying a cute little juglet. This thing it's a clay juglet that's about that big, and we've seen those in the excavations from this period. This is a very common Midianite thing. And the camels are the one-hump camels, the Bactrian camels. They're fairly common in this area. And the Midianites knew how to raise them, and they had lots of them, and everybody had one, and they were fast-moving. Okay, and then this is a wine press, and it's an awful angle on the thing, but that's a wine press. Wine press is usually cut into a piece of limestone. It's a little depression, and you take your vintage, all the grapes, and pile them up in there. And then the tradition is for the young women of the village to take their shoes off and go squishing around in the grapes and just squish them all. And this is supposed to be really fun. And then with all the juice will run down. You can see here there's a channel, and the grape juice runs out, and they collect that, and that's what they use to make wine. Okay. Threshing wheat is a different kind of operation. It is an essentially different kind of operation. A threshing floor in the Old Testament is the word that we usually translate an expanse. Okay, so there was an expanse between the firmament and this and that. What is an expanse? And there was a thing like surrounding the throne of God, brilliant as crystal, like an expanse. Okay, an expanse is a very simple word. It's a large, flat place, made flat by stomping. So you get, 1,000 people out on an area, and everybody gets up and stomps So all the grass is gone and all the weeds are gone and everything is kind of hard and flat. And then you sweep that all clear, and that's your threshing floor. Think of a Walmart parking lot, okay, without the stripes, and you're about right. The best place for a threshing floor is up on top of a hill, because when the threshing is going on, all the wheat and stuff is brought in. You bring oxen dragging threshing sleds, big heavy wooden things with rocks sticking out of the bottom. And the oxen pull these threshing sleds around and around on this floor, and it breaks the wheat away from the chaff, everything else. And all of the young men and women of the village come in with their winnowing forks, and they pick up the chaff, and they throw it up in the air, higher the better, and the wind blows the chaff away while the wheat falls down to the threshing floor. And then everybody in the village crawls up on this thing, and they pick up all these individual grains of wheat and gather them into jars. And that's the harvest. And it's a noisy celebration. It's loud. It's visible from miles away because you can see the plume of chaff going off into the distance from the top of a hill. It's the first place the Midianites would come. At harvest time, they'd head for the threshing floors, drive the people off and steal all the food. And so the people would starve the next winter. It was not a very good thing. And so what we have here is Gideon threshing wheat in a wine press. A wine press would typically be in a vineyard surrounded by the grapevines. And so you're kind of in the middle of nowhere, you're in a shady place, in a not very visible place, and he's down there behind this bit of cover, and he's mashing out wheat between a couple of rocks. He's threshing wheat in a wine press, trying to get enough grain to maybe make a few loaves of bread. That gives you an idea of just how bad things were. Afra, by the way, is the modern Arab town of Afala. If you've been to Israel, there's an excellent chance you've been through Afala and didn't know it. It's the kind of place you don't notice when you're going from one place to another. And what was that? Oh, that was Afala. Well, I know what was, but what was it? Afala is interesting. It's right at the crossroads. It should be a major commercial center, and I'm not sure why it's not. We've never stopped there. There's nothing there. But it's got a good view of almost everything. So, what are we doing here? Ooh, altars and Asherah poles. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior." I love this. So Gideon is there hiding in this wine press, and he's kind of getting his wheat to separate from the chaff a little bit, because he's scared to death, and he's all by himself, and he is absolutely, certainly, positively not a valiant warrior. The Lord uses the phrase "Chayil Gibor." We sometimes translate that mighty man of valor. The Gibor is a mighty man, usually a man of substance, a man who owns property, who has the means to afford a suit of armor, or at least what passed for a suit of armor in those days, and could be counted on to raise a certain number of the servants who worked on his property as a part of the militia when there was going to be a war. So Gibor, Mikhail Gibor, means a godlike or mighty man of valor. And Gideon is almost precisely the antithesis of that. He's definitely not demonstrating any of it here. So this is kind of fun. The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. And then Gideon said to him, still stooped over with a wheat in one hand, he said, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us?" Which I suppose is a question that everybody was asking at that time. "And where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Well, at least Gideon realizes that the miracles have stopped. They can't really count on that. And they've been given into the hand of Midian by the Lord. At least he recognizes that. The angel of the Lord doesn't bother repeating the words of the prophet. You notice that? Once God has spoken, he assumes that that's important enough that all of his people will pick up on it. And those who don't really weren't his people anyway. So perhaps Gideon knows already. Why has all this happened to us? Where are the miracles? Why has the Lord abandoned us? And the Lord, this is the angel of the Lord, and here he's called Adonai. The Lord looked at him and said, "Go in this your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" Okay, very, very significant line there. What strength does Gideon have? At this point, none of his own. Zero. Okay, the parallel here is with Moses. Moses says, "Who am I that I should go and bring Israel out of it? Who am I? Why should they listen to me?" Moses, I'm sorry to have to break this to you, but it really doesn't matter who you are. As it works out, I've chosen you, and I'm going to use you to do this thing. This is going to work miraculously well because I will go with you. How much strength does Gideon need? Well, significantly more than he has. And so the Lord says, "I will go with you." It doesn't matter who you are, Gideon. I expect you to be obedient now and watch my hand at work. That's the fun part of this. That's where it turns out fun. Yes, sir.
The angel of the Lord, I just want to be sure, is the Lord, right?
He is a character who speaks with all of the authority of God. Yeah. And he's enigmatic.
So you don't know if it's the angel or it's the Lord, but it's the Lord speaking through that angel.
Yeah, we're talking about the angel of the Lord. Who is this character anyway? And I'm going to have to give you the bureaucratic, mealy-mouth answer on this. Namely that we don't really know. This character speaks with all the authority of God. It absolutely does. The early church fathers were convinced that this had to be Christ himself. because he spoke with so much authority. Modern theologians are hesitant to say that because that detracts from the uniqueness of the incarnation. And when we're doing Trinitarian theology and trying to figure out exactly how all of that works, that turns out to be more important than who talked to Gideon. But at the same time, we have to say that this character speaks with so much authority that he is here called the Lord. Okay, this is the Lord's voice speaking through this character. So I know, I'm being a lawyer, but I mean that in the best possible way. For those of you who are attorneys, just in case somebody wants to sue me, no, I don't have a thing, not a thing. You can have it all, I don't have it. Okay. Go in this your strength and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? If I sent you, I'm going to go with you, and you will have all of this strength that I have today. And it doesn't really matter. And that, of course, is going to be the whole point of the Midian story as we go on. So, he said to him, "O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel?" Okay. Gideon is not a great man of faith. Okay. "Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh. I am the youngest in my father's house." Okay, so he's just a youngster in one of the small tribes. Manasseh, can any good thing come out of Manasseh? Who knows where the tribe of Manasseh even settled? I could show you, but wouldn't matter. Manasseh is not a big tribe, and Gideon is not a big kid. How shall I deliver Israel? And the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." So Gideon said to him, "If now I've found favor in your sight." I like that. Okay. And the way this turns out, this is funny, because it's because of the nature of the words. If I found favor, the Hebrew is chen, like a C-H-E-N. Everybody wants it to be H-E-N, they pronounce it hen, but it's chen. And we translate it usually grace. Most of our English translations use the word favor. And it's not merely favor. It is, in fact, grace. The divine provision of resources that the individual could never provide for himself. Gideon, what do you have to work with? Simple answer, nothing. Wrong answer. My grace will be sufficient for you. And you'll go in this strength that you have, and you'll defeat Midian.
Sounds kind of like Jesus.
Sounds an awful lot like Jesus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's what Lawrence is asking. Suppose Jesus could have said a thing like that? Oh yes, and Paul. If you want to understand grace, we go all the way back to the Old Testament, because it was also Noah that found favor, grace in the eyes of the Lord. Where do you find it? It just appeared. I like to tell my students, grace happens. They all know other things that just happened. But very significantly, grace happens. God reaches down into life and does spectacular things by his power. And it's not our strength, our intelligence, our brilliance that affects the changes in the lives of the society around us. It's the power of God himself. The grace of God is sufficient. How much will it take? As much as it takes. And you're not to worry about it because it doesn't matter who you are if I go with you. Okay, we put this all together, and this becomes, to my mind, the central thought, the big idea of the book of Judges. This is what the book of Judges is really about. If you walk away from God, you're going to find nothing but failure. But those who trust in the Lord and rely on his grace shall rise up with wings like eagles. They'll see the solution to their problems happen. It's not quite that simple, but that's the principle. So Gideon says, if now I've found favor in your sight, then, okay, it's a conditional clause. If I found favor, which I don't really believe is the implication, but if I have, then show me a sign that it's you who speak to me. This is called, Gideon's call for a sign, or sometimes we call this Gideon's fleece. He wants a miracle with a piece of fleece. Fleece is the wool that comes off a sheep. For those of you who've lived in a city all year long, or all your life, and you don't know where wool comes from, this is where wool comes from. The sheep make it. And once a year, the sheep come in for a trimming just before the hot season. And they've got a whole winter's full of wool, and they come in and get trimmed, and all that wool comes off. You card that, you make it into wool. Okay. You take the whole wool blanket off a sheep, and one of those is called a fleece. Pretty neat. I mean, it's a nice system, and a pretty neat thing. And Gideon would know about things like that. Everybody here raised sheep. And so he said, don't depart from me. Show me a sign. Please don't depart until I come back and bring out an offering and lay it before you. Oh, okay. If you're really the Lord, how do I really know who is this really? As Bill Cosby used to say years ago. I'm going to come in. I'm going to bring out an offering. And he brought out some of the first fruits and laid it, some meat and cheese and whatever, and laid it on the table or on a rock in front of the angel of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord pointed at it, and foom, zot foof, actually. With the zot, the offering disappeared in a small ball of flame, and the smoke rose up. Okay, the zot and the foof. Is this a good time to introduce the zot foof theory of Old Testament offerings? Yes, I guess I better. This isn't the first place we see this, but it's there's a pattern that we're going to see all the way through the Old Testament. When the Lord accepts an offering from an offerer, he responds with fire. The God who answers by fire, Elijah says he is God. And so you expect fire to come from heaven or to suddenly appear, and for the smoke to rise up to heaven as a sign that the offering has been accepted. Zot foof. Back in Leviticus, when the sons of Aaron offered strange fire before the Lord. Why was it strange? Well, because it wasn't fire that was authorized. The fire is supposed to come from God. And if you can't call down the fire, it's not a problem with God. It's a problem with the priest. If you got to set your own fire, that's strange fire. And you better check on your relationship with God. Oh, there's all kinds of applications for that. I'm not even going to start on it. Use your imagination. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with that. But the great change in the Old Testament happens about midway through the Old Testament period when the fire stopped falling. But we're not going to do that. So Gideon went in, prepared a young goat. How do you prepare a young goat in a couple of minutes? Anybody know how long it takes to slaughter a goat and make, I don't know, shawarma or something? What do you do? You know, goat meat is real good if you roast it for about 4 hours and slice the meat off. I'm getting hungry already with a little pita and hummus, some garbanzo beans, deep fried. Oh yeah. Okay, so the angel said, Gideon came out with an ephah of flour. He put the meat in the basket and the broth in the pot, and he brought them out under the oak and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread, lay them on this rock, pour out the broth, and he did so. And the angel of the Lord put out the end of his staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. The fire sprang up from the rock, consumed the meat, the unleavened bread, and then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight, like a Cheshire cat. And Gideon is surprised, and he looks at the rock, it's gone, and the angel is gone, and he's wondering, oh man, am I in trouble or am I in trouble? This is bad. And Gideon saw that he was the angel of the Lord, and he said, alas, the Hebrew is oi. You've heard oi. Oi, woe is me. Woe is me. For now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. Which actually would be a really cool thing. I would think that would be a good thing. I'm looking forward to seeing Jesus face to face. That's not scary at all. But Gideon was terrified. And so the angel answers him. And it says, literally, the Lord said to him, peace be with you. Shalom. Do not fear. You will not die. No one can see the Lord face to face and live. Except Gideon. He gets to. Kind of a cool thing. And the Lord said to him, peace to you, you will not die. And Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and named it, the Lord is Peace. And to this day, it's still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. This day, by the way, is that day. It's been gone a long time. If there was an altar in Ophrah, somebody would have built a national park around it. And we don't have that. This, by the way, is what an altar looks like. This one is not anywhere near Ophrah. This is at Dan in the north. The traditional Israelite altar is made of mostly uncut stones. But you see the steps and some others and cut parts. The altar is up at the very top. There's a flat place on top of these mostly uncut stones. This was actually an altar to the golden calf at Dan. This was really an imitation of a Canaanite project. It was Jeroboam, king of Israel after Solomon, king of the north, who built this altar. We still haven't found the one at Bethel, but at any rate, it gives you an idea. The altar would be right there. Very nearby would be an Asherah pole. An Asherah pole is something like, it's like a telephone pole. It's a great big piece of wood. You take the whole tree, cut the bark off, smooth it up, maybe do some carvings on it, dig a hole, plant this pole straight up and down in the ground, tamp all the dirt around it. And so you've got an altar for Baal, and on the altar you would sacrifice animals to provide meat for the potluck, and also vegetables and grain and drink. In the Canaanite situation, that's the way it was done. The later Greco-Roman situation, you'd have separate temples for the meat and the bread and the wine and the other, because it multiplies profits. The Asherah pole, let's see, am I allowed? Okay, it was a phallic symbol. And if you're not sure what that is, look it up. It was symbolic of the fertility cult. So this is where the Asherah pole was the place where the prostitutes were available. Okay? So there's an altar and an Asherah pole. And these were maintained, this high place for Baal was maintained by Gideon's father. Okay, now we see a little further Gideon's background and why he really isn't particularly qualified to be a judge of Israel. He's not anywhere close to the caliber of Deborah. Okay? And that becomes more and more obvious. Okay, he says, now on the same night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and a second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal, which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. Okay, so pull down the altar and cut down and chop up the Asherah implied pole, which is beside it. That would be an act of desecration. In the Canaanite culture, that would be an act of desecration. A fairly bad thing to do by cultural norms. It would be politically incorrect to knock down that altar and to tear down that pole. The name Gideon probably wasn't Gideon's original name. The name means chopper. Literally, the name means chopper. A friend years ago gave me an axe for splitting firewood. Got a big iron head on the thing. It's got a couple of cams that drive outwards and help with splitting the wood. It's kind of neat, and it's called a chopper one. So I've nicknamed it Gideon. That's what the word means. Gideon probably got this name after this event. His friends called him Chopper. I kind of like that. Okay. And build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this stronghold in an orderly manner. In other words, do it right. Do the right kind of altar. Take a second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah, which you shall cut down. So take your dad's best bull, the symbol of strength and fertility, by the way. Baal is called the bull. The Asherah is the symbol of female fertility. And this whole religion was built to guarantee the peace and prosperity and fertility of the nation. That's what it's supposed to be for. So chop that down, build a proper altar, sacrifice your dad's bull on top of that, and burn it all up with the wood from the Asherah pole itself. Chop it up, split it, build a pile, and burn the whole thing. Okay, I like that. And then Gideon, to his credit, took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had spoken to him. Because he was too afraid of his father's household and the men of the city to do it by day, he did it by night. Okay, it's a step in the right direction. Could he have gotten away with it by day? Well, yes. Of course he could. Because God was with him. But Gideon was not the least bit sure of that yet. We're going to have some more fun with that. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was torn down, and the Asherah which was beside it cut down, and the second bull offered on the altar which had been built. And they said to one another, who did this thing? And when they searched about and inquired, they heard Gideon, the son of Joash, did this thing. Then the men of the city said to Joash, bring out your son that he may die. Okay, that's the punishment. For he has torn down the altar of Baal, and indeed he has cut down the Asherah beside it. This is what happens in a society that's given itself entirely over to the worship of other gods, has replaced the truth with a lie that they will defend to the death. It's a good thing it has no modern counterparts, isn't it? Then Joash said to all who stood against him, will you contend for Baal, or will you deliver him? Whoever will plead for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, if Baal is a god, let him contend for himself, because someone has cut down his altar. The answer is, let us now deal with reality. It's time to stop pretending that your Baal is a god. It's time for Baal to either put up or shut up. Here's Gideon. Let Baal contend with him. Anyone? Anyone at all? Kind of a fun scene because it doesn't work. Whoever will plead with him shall be put to death. Therefore, on that day he named him Jerubbaal. That is to say, let Baal contend against him, which is good. And Gideon didn't die, and the people didn't kill him. They were confronted with the truth and realized they had no options. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the sons of the east assembled themselves, and they crossed over and camped in the valley of Jezreel. What have I got here? Ooh, okay, Baal can defend himself, he sure can. And here they come to the valley of Jezreel. This is where we're going to stop today. This is the spring of Herod. We're looking across at Mount Moreh, which is off to the left, off to the west from Mount Tabor. And straight across between where I'm standing and Mount Moreh, in the distance, probably about 4 miles, is the site of Ophrah. So this is the spot. And this is the general area where the Midianites would have been camped. And this spring is the spot where Gideon is going to collect his armies and then winnow them down. I'll show you how that works next week. Thanks